This is going to be such a big deal that God is going to reset the calendar. This is a new beginning, Israel. That we're going forward. It's totally new. So now, what is going to happen in order that there's going to be this difference between Israel and Egypt? Well, God required the sacrifice of a lamb of the flock from earthly Israel. Look at verse 3. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. Each family would take a lamb out of the flock, and that lamb would be for their household. And the lamb to be sacrificed was to be as perfect as possible, and 4 days are actually given to the Israelites to inspect that lamb to make sure that it is without blemish. And then once examined, Israel was to slay the lambs all together at the same time on that same day on that first month of the year. Look at verse 5. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year, and ye shall keep it until the 14th day of the month. Remember, they picked it out on the 10th. Now on the 14th day of the month, the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And the blood of that lamb was then to be applied around the door with a brush made of something called hyssop. Look at verse 7. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorposts of the houses wherein they shall eat it. And then if you jump over to verse 22, Exodus 12, verse 22, it says, And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. Now, we don't really know what this hyssop was. We don't know exactly what plant we would call that today. But obviously it's something maybe like pine needles, where it's like a brush. It's used all over the Old Testament for the purpose of painting something ceremonially, water or blood or whatever. So you think of it as like a brush of some kind, using the blood then to strike the doorpost and the lintel. Now, once the blood was let out of the lamb and it was applied to the door, the lamb was to be roasted and eaten in its entirety by the people within that house. Jump back over to verse 8 of Exodus chapter 12. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden it all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the purtenance thereof, that means the innards. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. Now, this lamb was to be eaten with a certain attitude as well, an attitude of watchfulness and readiness, knowing that their redemption from Egypt was very close at hand. Look at verse 21. God says, And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. See, they knew that once this event happened, they were going to need to get out quick. Right? They needed to be watchful, and they needed to be ready. Then the Lord would unleash his vengeance against Egypt. Jump back to verse 12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. But even though the children of Israel dwelled in the land of Egypt, the angel of death would pass over them, and all because of the blood that had been placed on their doorposts. Look at verse 13. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. You hear the word pass over. The angel of death will pass over. And from that day forward, Israel was to observe the 14th day of the first month of the year as a memorial of what God had done. Look at verse 14. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. And then, of course, God did exactly what He said He would do. Jump down to verse 29 of Exodus 12, verse 29. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Okay, firstborn, when you think about it, every household has at least, every family has at least one firstborn. In my household, there would actually be 3 firstborns, because I'm a firstborn, Marjorie's a firstborn, Joe's a firstborn. You know, so in some houses there'd be more, in some houses there'd be less. But that's a lot of people dying all at once, and a lot of animals dying all at once. And the Passover not only convinced Egypt to allow Israel to go, but they insisted that they go. Now, of course, if you know the rest of the story, you also know that Pharaoh changed his mind and actually chased after them anyway, but that's a different topic for a different sermon. The redemption from slavery in Egypt through the Passover was accomplished by God's power. Let's not forget that it's God's power behind this whole event. Look at chapter 13. Just flip over to chapter 13 and look in verse 3. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. And this seems quite obvious, but you know, He knows these people. He knows they're going to forget these kinds of things. We all share the common human nature. It's always going to be a temptation for earthly people to forget the power of the Lord and to start giving themselves credit for what God has done. That is one of the reasons that He set up this yearly memorial to this event. So, that is earthly Passover. And it was this particular event that happened in Exodus chapter 12 that is being celebrated in Jerusalem in the last days of our Savior's life. Luke chapter 22 verse 1, once again, says, now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. Okay? So this yearly celebration is just about arrived. That's what's going on in Jerusalem. And the preparations for this massive sacrifice had been going on for days here in Jerusalem. I mean, think about it. Thousands and thousands of lambs had to be prepared for the sacrifice. They had to be inspected. You had to get all the firewood you were going to need, because all these lambs had to be roasted with fire. You know, you couldn't boil them. You couldn't eat them raw. You had to roast them with fire. So there's lots of preparations going on.